So, hello there, and welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts, I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I continue on with my Harry Potter film reviews with my review of the fifth Harry Potter film, Harry Potter and the Order of the Pheonix. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, even look, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify at Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, whatever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. Also, I should say today that I have a bit of this thing I like to call fuzzy thinking, because I went swimming earlier today, and when you go swimming, it just affects the way you think throughout the rest of the day. So if at any point I don't really make sense in this podcast and I don't go back and correct myself, like if I get words in a sentence wrong, it's just because of the way I'm thinking. Honestly, my head is all over the place right now, but I'm still going to go through with this review no matter what. So let's get into it, shall we? My thoughts on Harry Potter and the Order of the Pheonix. So, as already mentioned, this is the fifth Harry Potter movie, and this was the first Harry Potter movie to be directed by David Yates. David Yates, who would later go on to direct the rest of the Harry Potter films, and also all three Fantastic Beasts movies. And I've seen all three Fantastic Beasts films. I like the third one. I'm not a big fan of the first two. I don't hate the first film. I thought it was fine, and the second film, I really didn't like that. I remember seeing that at cinema and just being confused the entire runtime. But I didn't mind the third one. I saw that at the cinema too, and I didn't mind that. I didn't think it was brilliant, but it was watchable and it was entertaining for the 2 hours and a half it was on. And this was the first Harry Potter Wizarding World film that David Yates directed. Like I've already said, he directed the rest of the Harry Potter films and all three Fantastic Beasts movies. And unlike Chris Columbus or Alfonso Cuarón or Mike Newell, who directed the previous Harry Potter movies, David Yates hasn't really directed anything else great outside of the Harry Potter franchise. At least critically. There's this film, I'm going to get the name right here, The Girl in the Cafe, what a generic name, The Girl in the Cafe, which released in 2005, which is probably the reason he got the gig for Harry Potter. That is critically acclaimed. I haven't seen that film, but it's critically acclaimed, and, it's got something like an 85% on Rotten Tomatoes, so clearly people like that film, and that was, as I mentioned, probably the reason he got the gig for Harry Potter and the Order of the Pheonix. But also, David Yates, outside of the Harry Potter franchise, has directed the likes of 2016's The Legend of Tarzan. I've only seen that film once, and I watched it at a time when I was more, open to liking a lot more movies, and I really didn't like that one. I found it really boring. I never want to find a Tarzan film boring, but I did with that one. And most recently, David Yates also directed Pain Hustlers, which starred Chris Evans, Emily Blunt, and Andy Garcia. It came out on Netflix last year, and that film got a lot of bad reviews, although some audiences were actually saying, I heard some reviews from audience members on, I heard some reviews from people online who said they actually quite enjoyed the movie. They disagree with the critics, but I haven't seen Pain Hustlers because I have a rule: if a film's getting bad reviews, I'm just not going to go and check it out because I don't want to waste my time. So I didn't do it with that, but maybe I need to give it a chance, because actually I heard some people saying it was okay, it was quite an entertaining watch. So I can't really speak on Pain Hustlers, and I can't speak on The Girl in the Cafe, but I can speak on The Legend of Tarzan, and I didn't like that film, and I have seen all three Fantastic Beasts films which he directed, and I don't think any of them, although I like the third film, is that well directed. Nevertheless, I was looking forward to watching this film because my liking of the Harry Potter franchise is increasing as I'm watching the films. I really liked Chamber of Secrets. I really enjoyed Prison of Azkaban. In fact, that's gone up in my estimation since I first saw it. I'm tempted to go back and rewatch it once I've seen all the Harry Potter movies and see if I like it more. And I really enjoyed, and probably my favourite so far, is Goblet of Fire. That was the last Harry Potter movie. I really enjoyed that, particularly with its introduction to Ralph Fiennes as Voldemort. I thought that was genuinely one of the best director sequences in all the Harry Potter movies I've seen so far, and I was completely hooked and completely locked in that scene. You know, I couldn't keep my eyes away from what was going on in Ralph Fiennes' introduction as Voldemort. So I wanted to see where the story went after that, and I was looking forward to seeing this film quite a lot. And after watching the 5th installment in the Harry Potter franchise, which of course Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix, which I'm reviewing in this podcast today, here are my thoughts on it. This is the first Harry Potter movie I straight up dislike. I don't hate it. I don't hate it at all. I do think it has some merits in there, and I didn't find it unwatchable by any means. But I didn't really care about anything going on, and this was the first Harry Potter movie I found dull. It was like, as I've titled this podcast today, it was like they forgot to make it entertaining. It didn't have any sort of magic in its direction. The story wasn't that compelling, in my opinion. And the whole time I'm just thinking, Voldemort's out there. Let's focus on him a lot more. And you can argue the film does focus on Voldemort, but just because he's not, physically present throughout most of the film doesn't actually mean it's not focusing on him. If you follow my thinking there, I think I even lost myself a bit there. But at the same time, though, he's not really in this film that much. He appears towards the end, but I was longing for Voldemort to show up, and I felt the film was telling the wrong story. I didn't really understand why it took so long for the Ministry of Magic to actually acknowledge that Voldemort is back. I don't understand why we had to spend 2 hours and a half to wait for them to acknowledge that. Plus, the film didn't have anything that was special about it. I don't love the first Harry Potter movie, The Philosopher's Stone. I don't love that film. But it's got the chess game, and it's got Diagon Alley, which at this point in the franchise I'm pretty sure hasn't returned. It's in Chamber of Secrets, actually. You do see Diagon Alley again there, but it isn't in Prison of Azkaban, nor is it in Goblet of Fire, and I don't think it's in this movie. That's how much I remember about this film. I don't remember much about it. I saw a couple of days ago now, and I remember a lot more about Prison of Azkaban and a lot more about Goblet of Fire, which I saw a couple of weeks ago now, but I don't remember much about Order of the Phoenix. I only watched it a couple of days ago. It's a largely forgettable film. But anyway, going back into what I was saying, Philosopher's Stone has the chess game, it has the introduction to Hogwarts, the introduction to Diagon Alley, at least that, and the three-headed dog, at least that film was trying to do something different. It was trying to have these actually creative ideas in there, if you follow me. It had some creative and imaginative ideas in there, which I really liked. Chamber of Secrets had the flying car and the spiders, and then the snake later on, which I keep forgetting the name of. It had all that, and that made that film a lot more enjoyable, in my opinion. Prison of Azkaban had the night bus, and it had the werewolf transformation scene in there, where one of the professors at Hogwarts is actually a werewolf. It had Gary Oldman as Sirius Black, who is back in this film, and thank God he was, by the way. But, he was in that film, and that was a great addition to it. And then the fourth Harry Potter movie, Goblet of Fire, had all the games going on, had the underwater sequence, it had a dragon in there, it had Robert Pattinson in there. I'm not saying Robert Pattinson made it any more special, but at the same time, though, it kind of did. It had all these great additions to it, including the introductions of Ralph Fiennes as Voldemort. But this film has nothing notable about it. There's nothing in this film that made me go, oh wow, I'm going to remember that now from this film in particular. Those things that I liked about this movie, but that they were mainly borrowed over from films from the previous Harry Potter movies. Like I've already mentioned, you see Sirius Black back, but he was in Prison of Azkaban, and he had a small role in Goblet of Fire, so it wasn't that exciting seeing him back. I liked that he had a big role in this film, and I like how he plays a fatherly figure to Harry Potter. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this film, he dies, and I like the idea of killing him off, although I did think it was slightly underwhelming, but I like how much he was in this film, and I like the role he played, and I like seeing Brendan Gleeson back as Mad-Eyed Moody. He's barely in this film, but I like seeing him back. I like seeing the Weasleys back, because you didn't really see the Weasley mother in the last film at all. Many of the things I liked about this film were just borrowed over from the previous Harry Potter movies. So that's the point I'm making. Nothing about this film really made me go, wow, that's something creative or something imaginative that I haven't yet seen in the Harry Potter franchise. Was, although I've had problems with the previous 4 Harry Potter movies, they have had that though. And I wanted that from this film, and God, I hope we get that from the future Harry Potter movie, because, as already mentioned, one of the reasons I'm reviewing these films right now is because it's basically like I'm watching these films for the first time. I have seen this film a very, very, very long time ago, but I barely remembered anything about it. And now I remember why I barely remembered anything about it, because I found it really dull and really slow. There's nothing about this film which I'm going to take that back actually. There's not nothing, but there's not much about this film that I found that exciting or that entertaining. The best part of the film, in my opinion, is when you see Dumbledore's secret army training. You know, when Harry and Hermione and Ron start that secret wizard club where they're all training in case they have to fight Voldemort and Voldemort's army. And I liked all that stuff because it actually felt like there was a bit of magic there. Not only in what was going on, because obviously you saw a lot of people doing spells on screen during those sequences, stuff with Dumbledore's secret army, but also in the way it was directed. In those sequences, it felt like David Yates was actually invested in the project, and there was some like one long takes, which I actually quite enjoyed watching. It felt like there was some magic in the storytelling during those moments. But the rest of the film, the subplots, the stuff with Professor Umbridge was I didn't really care about. And you know, you might argue that the stuff, you know, this film is meant to feel dull. It's meant to feel like the magic is being lost because Professor Umbridge, who's well played by Imelda Staunton, by the way, who just played the Queen, the late Queen Elizabeth II in The Crown seasons 5 and 6. You may argue that, you know, this film is meant to feel dull because Professor Umbridge is making Hogwarts feel dull. She's taking over Hogwarts from Professor Dumbledore. However, I would argue that you can still make it entertaining, though. You could still make that fun, and you can still make it quite quirky, and I don't think this film really did that. Again, I felt the filmmaking, more than anything, was really lackluster. I'm surprised David Yates carried on making the Harry Potter movies. I'm surprised the producers were that happy with his direction, because it felt like after Goblet of Fire, and that's really weird to say, but it felt like after Goblet of Fire that the Harry Potter producers wanted a more character-driven film, and they forgot that actually Harry Potter films are blockbusters. Because one thing I really enjoyed about Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the last Harry Potter movie, was that it felt like an event movie. It felt like a blockbuster. You know, and not only what was going on in the film, because that's actually events going on in the film, but also just in the feel of the film as a whole. It felt like the film had a big budget and all the money was on the screen in the best way possible. But in this film, it felt like they forgot it was a blockbuster, though, which is why I said it was weird to say after Goblet of Fire that this was a character-driven film, because I'm not really sure what they're going for with this movie. There's none of that excitement of Goblet of Fire. There's none of that direction of Prison of Azkaban. I was longing for Alfonso Cuarón's direction in Prison of Azkaban. I was longing for that with this film. I just hit my bike as I said that with my hand. I was longing for that because this film, just nothing in the direction was that great. It felt like it had generic direction to it. Whereas the last film felt like they had some magic in the filmmaking, some magic in the storytelling. What this film just didn't. The storytelling felt generic, it felt plain. And, you know, some people might say that's because these films are maturing now. But I would argue this franchise has already matured. I'd argue that it matured with Prison of Azkaban and Goblet of Fire, which actually touched on some really dark themes and touched on some really dark ideas and did them in a way which felt more mature than the first 2 Harry Potter movies. In fact, I would even argue that Chamber of Secrets is more mature than Philosopher's Stone. So I would argue that this franchise has been maturing over time. This isn't the first film that it's been fully mature, so the fact that it's mature doesn't really, in my opinion, give give a get out of jail free card, for lack of a better phrase, as to why it felt so dull. So yeah, I did like parts of the film. I liked all the stuff with Dumbledore's Secret Army. I liked seeing certain characters back. For example, I didn't know Sirius Black was in this film. I completely forgot that, and I like seeing him back. I like seeing Mad-Eyed Moody back. I like seeing Lupin back. I like seeing the Weasley family there, and I thought Imelda Staunton did a good job as Professor Umbridge. And I liked seeing Ray Fiennes as Voldemort pop back up at the end of the film, and his duel, his wizarding duel with Professor Dumbledore was actually well done, and I think you can tell that David Yates is a fan of the Harry Potter books, because the way that duel was shot, it felt like somebody who had already visually thought about it in his mind beforehand. Not a lot of the rest of the film felt like that, but that section, the duel between Voldemort and Dumbledore, felt like David Yates had put a lot of thought into that before he even worked on the movie, before he started to work on any of the Harry Potter films. Plus, this is the first Harry Potter movie we got to see Helena Bonham Carter as Bellatrix Lestrange. I think that's what the character is called. I think she was great in the film, and I found that character really interesting. The only reason I find that character really interesting is nothing in the writing, but in Helena Bonham Carter's performance. Because Helena Bonham Carter, I mean, she's one of those people who could just read the phone book and it'd be interesting, it'd be compelling, it'd be engaging, you'd just be so drawn to it. And as soon as she was on screen, I was like, oh, Helena Bonham Carter's in the film. Great, now hopefully the film's going to get better. It didn't really, in my opinion, but hopefully the film's going to get better. And I do think she was one of the best parts of the movie. Also, the musical score isn't bad. I don't know who did the musical score for this film. Let's just quickly look it up. Give me a second. It was Nicholas Hooper, apparently. I am not familiar with that name. Yeah, so there you go, Nicholas Hooper. Who I've never come across his music in the past. I thought his musical score was fine. I mean, it's not John Williams, and you can tell it wasn't John Williams. But I gotta get past that now. John Williams only composed music for the first 3 Harry Potter movies. But it wasn't John Williams, and I thought it did a fine job with the musical score. But it felt like the musical score was used too far apart. Like, what I mean there, it didn't feel like the musical score was used enough. It felt like when the musical score was used, it was just to try and make the film more exciting, whilst I think the filmmaking should have been doing that itself, if you follow me. I don't think that the score... It's a problem I have with a lot of movies, actually, and I don't really talk about it on this channel, but I should, because it's, it's what I mainly do on this channel is movie and TV reviews. But one thing that annoys me with a film sometimes is when a filmmaker employs a score, uses the musical score to make it seem better than it actually is. So if you take the musical score out, it wouldn't be the same. Sometimes that annoys me, and it felt like that was the case with the musical score for this film. It felt like they were employing the musical score to try and make things more exciting than they actually were, to try and make scenes more exciting. That's probably why I like the Dumbledore Army stuff so much, because the musical score there actually was trying to add something to the film that I don't know if the directing was doing. I do think the directing was better in the Dumbledore's Army stuff, but I also felt like it could have been better. It could have been a lot better. The Dumbledore Army stuff was where it felt like David Yates really knew what he was doing, and also later on with the duel between Dumbledore and Voldemort. But it still felt like David Yates... I'd never really directed a blockbuster before. There was nothing in direction, unlike the directing for Prisoner of Azkaban or Goblet of Fire. Even the first 2 Harry Potter movies, which were directed by Chris Columbus, who I do not think is a good director. But there was nothing in this film which made me, unlike the previous Harry Potter movies in terms of the direction, made me go, wow, that's something I haven't seen in a blockbuster before. That's something I haven't seen in this franchise yet. Well, there was, but not in a good way, really. There was like, wow, I didn't know you can make this dull. Those sections of the film like that, which were completely uneven, and I'm not really sure what they were going for. Like, what was the point of this film? It felt more like a setup for the next couple of Harry Potter movies. And maybe I'll come back to this film in a couple of weeks' time once I've finished watching all eight, couldn't even say 8 there, all 8 Harry Potter movies. Maybe that'll be the case. I come back to the film in a couple of weeks' time, and actually I like it quite a lot because of how it serves the story for the Harry Potter story overall, you know? But having just got to this film, for me, it felt like set up for the next couple of movies. It felt like we had to do all these things. It felt like a checklist of things to do for the next couple of films, and it didn't really feel like a complete story. Unlike Goblet of Fire, which I wasn't sure towards the end whether it was going to feel complete, but then it did feel complete. Unlike Goblet of Fire, unlike Prisoner of Azkaban, and unlike the previous 2 Harry Potter movies, this one did not feel complete. It felt like part 1 in a story that is going to continue in the next film, the 6th film in this franchise, whilst this shouldn't feel like that. It's the 5th part of a story that I'm currently watching, and it didn't feel like the 5th part though. It felt like the first part, when actually it didn't really make sense at all, because Ray finds his Voldemort was introduced in the last part. So if anything, you could argue that the last film was part 1 of the rest of the story for the Harry Potter franchise. But then you could even argue further that, you know, Voldemort had his introduction in the first Harry Potter movie. So that was part 1, which makes sense because that was the first Harry Potter movie, whilst we're at the 5th Harry Potter film now, and for some reason it's feeling like part 1. It's feeling like it's setting up the rest of the franchise, and that was a problem I had with Fantastic Beasts 2. What was it called? The Crimes of Grindelwald. That was a problem I had with that film. It felt like set up for the next couple of Fantastic Beasts movies, and even so I enjoyed Fantastic Beasts 3, I would have preferred Fantastic Beasts 2 to have a more complete story, and I would have... I'm struggling to speak today. I would have preferred this movie to have a more complete story rather than leave it open-ended, because the ending annoyed me as well. That was the other thing. The ending really annoyed me when they're all walking to get the train back home from Hogwarts, and Harry's like, I've got one thing Voldemort hasn't. You know, something worth fighting for. And you know why that annoyed me? Because I don't think it's a terrible scene, but you know why that annoyed me? Because it felt like a copy of the ending to The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, one of the greatest sequels of all time. And towards the end of that film, it's not at the very end, but towards the end of that film, Samwise Gamgee gives one of the most emotionally moving speeches of all 3 Lord of the Rings films, when he's talking about how the bad in this world will eventually be defeated and the good will reign, and he knows that because there's good in this world and it's worth fighting for, and it's one of the best moments in the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy, in my opinion. Whilst in this film, it felt like they copied that, and it also didn't feel earned. I didn't get to the end of the film and go, oh wow, that moment's actually emotionally affecting. I got to the end of the film and was like, oh, got something worth fighting for. That's where this film went to. You realise that you got something worth fighting for. Well, couldn't you realise that half an hour into the film? Why did it have to take 2 hours and a half for you to realise that? I did not really like the ending. I didn't hate it, but I thought it could have been better, and I thought the ending could have had more effect to it and feel more complete. Because, I mean, it didn't leave me wanting more either, though. Even though this doesn't feel like a complete film, in my opinion, it didn't leave me wanting more. And Goblet of Fire feels like a complete film and left me wanting more. So did Prisoner of Azkaban, and so did Chamber of Secrets, and so did Philosopher's Stone. Even so I didn't really like the first film. Running out of air there. Even so I didn't really like the first film, it left me wanting more. Whilst this film, it didn't leave me wanting more. I mean, I'm going to watch the next one because I'm watching all these films right now. I'm watching all the Harry Potter franchise as I speak. I'm going to watch it later today, but I'm a bit like, I'm not that excited because it's directed by David Yates, and I don't think David Yates is a good director. I mean, okay, I haven't seen one of his films, which has actually got quite a good critical rating on Rotten Tomatoes, but, you know, I really felt, more than anything, that this was a slow and dull watch, and like they forgot to make it entertaining. There was no Quidditch game in this film, with the last film having all these different games and events going on. You know, with the dragon and the underwater sequence in that film, and later on when they're doing the maze sequence. I mean, all that stuff was so exciting and so sometimes exhilarating to watch with that film. It was exciting and engaging in the way you wanted that film to be. Whilst this film didn't have any of those game sequences, and it felt jarring after watching the last film. I was waiting for a Quidditch game sequence. I was waiting for something like the Night Bus, or something like the underwater sequence in the last film, or something like the Hippogriff from Prison of Azkaban. I was waiting for something like that in this film, and I didn't get that. I really didn't get it. You know, I mean, it is what it is, and I didn't hate the film. Hating would, I think, would have required me to actually get emotionally engaged in it. I didn't find it that emotionally engaging. I felt that I was just waiting for the film to get to something more narratively compelling, because I didn't find Professor Umbridge that compelling of a character, and there were some weird narrative decisions which I didn't totally agree with. Were the Dudleys really needed in this film? I like seeing the Dudleys back. Don't get me wrong, I like seeing those characters back, because, well, I think all those actors are really entertaining to watch. They play the characters very well. You believe them as this family who do not like Harry Potter but had to take him in. You know, I like seeing the Dudleys back in these films, but I wasn't totally sure if they were needed. Also, when Professor Umbridge was mad with Harry, Ron and Hermione later on in the film and had them three in her office, and she'd questioned them about the whole stuff that the Weasley twins have just done, which didn't really make sense to me, but whatever. When they have them in the office and then Hermione says it's because of Dumbledore's secret weapon, and they take her to the forest, I just found all that dumb. Because, I mean, when I've been in a office with a teacher before, and I've been in trouble in the past, which hasn't happened loads, but when I was in trouble back in secondary school, and if I was a teacher to come to the forest and to tell them why I was, to show them why I was doing what I was doing, they would have just laughed in my face or would have yelled at me. I did not believe that Professor Umbridge would follow Harry and Hermione to the forest in order to see if they were telling the truth. I thought that was really, again, narratively dumb. I didn't get that. I didn't get the point. A lot of things going on in this film, and again, it may make sense in future movies, but it didn't really have any of that magic. It felt devoid of any magic to me. It felt devoid of any excitement, and it really felt devoid of any proper entertainment. I like the Dumbledore's Army stuff. I like the Dumbledore Secret Army stuff. I did like that. But I'm struggling to think of many other things I found entertaining with this film, because at one time it was something like 2 hours and 20 minutes. It wasn't even 2 hours and a half, this film. I think I've said in this podcast already that it was 2 hours and a half, but actually it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. I think it was actually under 2 hours and 20 minutes, but for the sake of argument, let's say it was 2 hours and 20 minutes. At a 2 hour and 20 minute runtime, this one felt like 3 hours, whilst the last film was almost 3 hours. It was something like 2 hours and 40 minutes. And that film felt like 90 minutes. This film felt like 3 hours, even though it was 40 minutes shorter than 3 hours. It felt like the one time it was. And I didn't really find any of it that engaging narratively, or I didn't find any of the characters that engaging. I didn't really find the story engaging, and I thought overall it was just it felt like set up for future movies. And because I haven't watched the rest of the Harry Potter franchise, I'm not appreciating that setup yet. You know? I'm really not sure why certain things took so long to come to fruition. So, yeah, this one really wasn't for me. Again, I didn't hate it, but it felt like I forgot to make it entertaining. And so, all in all, I'm going to say that the fifth Harry Potter movie, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I'm going to give the fifth Harry Potter movie a 5 out of 10. Again, I didn't hate it. If I hated it, I would have given it a lower rating. Actually, I'm going to revise my rating. I might give it a 4 out of 10. I've changed my rating. I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10 because I really wasn't that entertained by it. You know, more than anything. And I thought the franchise was getting better. I really felt the franchise was going to get better after Voldemort's introduction, but it just kind of went the other way. Well, with this film anyway. I'm hoping the sixth film changes my opinion on everything. I'm hoping to finish the 6th film on Netflix this morning and go, you know what? That was great. And made Order of the Pheonix better. I'm so hoping that's the case. And here's another thing, one thing I forgot to mention, is when you see all those wizards and Mad-Eyed Moody break Harry out of the Dudleys early on in the film, all I was thinking was, why is this not more exciting? Because they literally just use a spell on his bedroom door at the Dudley's house and then say, Harry, come this way. And they walk out of the house and they're on brooms. And the broom scene was fine, but all I was thinking was, I mean, it's not the flying car sequence from Chamber of Secrets, you know? Remember how Ron and his twin brothers used a flying car to escape Harry from the Dudleys in Chamber of Secrets? That was wildly entertaining. Whilst here, when you break Harry out of the Dudleys, it feels like, I was like, cool, you know, fine, alright, okay, we're just getting on with the plot now. And it felt like it could have been done better. The whole film felt like it could have been done better, and it felt like they forgot these films were blockbusters. These films were event movies. These films, you know, the term blockbuster comes from people queuing around the block to go and watch Jaws. You know, Spielberg was the person who invented the blockbuster, and blockbuster continued on these different franchises: Star Wars, Marvel, you name it. And Harry Potter films, when they were coming out, I remember there being blockbusters. I remember there being big deals when I was all the way back at primary school. But so I imagine this was a blockbuster when it came out, but it didn't feel like a blockbuster when I watched it. Whilst Goblet of Fire felt like a blockbuster. And I mean that in a good way. It felt like an event movie. And it was exciting because of that. It felt like there was a thrill with it. There was an essence of adventure, an essence of epicness. I don't really like using that word. But, you know, there was a feeling of just something exciting happening when I was watching Goblet of Fire. And the same with Prisoner of Azkaban. But there wasn't that with this film. There was the opposite. There was this feeling of, yeah, we're just kind of making it up as we go along. Even though they weren't, I know that, because these films are based on books, but it felt like the first one with the hype. It felt like the franchise was getting a little tired. Again, I hope the next film is so much better. I'm hoping I come out of it and go, wow. But only one can hope, because with this film, I didn't like it because it felt like they forgot to make it entertaining for the most part. And more than anything, I didn't like it because it was dull and it was devoid of any magic feeling, which is not really what you want for a Harry Potter movie. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more, for me, Harry Potter and the Order of the Pheonix is a 4 out of 10. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Harry Potter and the Order of the Pheonix, please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Maybe you love the film, maybe it's your favourite Harry Potter movie. And if that's the case, that's great. And please let me know why I'm wrong in the comment section below. Or maybe you feel similar to me, which is also great. Please let me know your thoughts on this Harry Potter movie and the 5th Harry Potter movie in the comment section below. And look forward to my review of the next Harry Potter movie, what's it, Half-Blood Prince, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, coming at some point in the next couple of weeks on this channel. But until then guys, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast, and if you haven't yet, please do click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast, and look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast, and I suppose this is it. So I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye!